Hey guys, we're excited to partner with upcoming YouTuber James Lee of 5149. He's going to explain culture, politics, anything else that needs explaining, and we're really excited about it.
Yep, here is his latest effort. Let's get to it.
Hey there, my name is James Lee. Welcome to another segment of 5149 on Breaking Points. And today I want to talk about Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum. Not the conspiracies and such, although I do think we all love a good conspiracy from time to time. But in many cases, I find the truth to be much more frightening than the conspiracy because it's unfolding more or less in plain sight right before our very eyes.
Damen und Herren, herzlich willkommen hier in Davos.
If you go back 50 years to the time when the forum was conceived, the whole idea was to make the multi-stakeholder concept come alive.
So what is this multi-stakeholder concept that the World Economic Forum and its chairman Klaus Schwab have been championing for decades? Well, the term is derived from stakeholder capitalism, a form of capitalism in which companies do not only optimize short-term profits for shareholders, but seek long-term value creation by taking into account the needs of all their stakeholders, such as customers, suppliers, employees, communities, and society at large. Now, the idea of stakeholder capitalism might sound incredibly appealing given the devastating results stemming from corporate commitment to maximizing shareholder value over the last half century. Analysis from Forbes magazine, quote, while MSV, maximization of shareholder value, delivered a gargantuan transfer of assets to the existing owners of shares, it didn't deliver for the rest of society. The best analysts could see that MSV was a toxic mix of soaring short-term corporate profits, astronomical executive pay that led to stagnant median incomes, growing inequality, periodic massive financial crashes, declining corporate life expectancy, slowing productivity, declining rates of return on assets, and overall, a widening distrust in business. So to sum it up, capitalism is badly in need of a PR overhaul, and Klaus Schwab's World Economic Forum is equal to the task.
We have the means to improve the states of the world, but two conditions are necessary. The first one is that we act all as stakeholders of larger communities, that we serve not our only self-interests, but we serve the community. That's what we call stakeholder responsibility. And second, that we collaborate. And this is the reason why you find many opportunities here during the meeting to engage into very action and impact-oriented initiatives.
That was a clip of Klaus Schwab's opening remarks at the World Economic Forum's annual meeting in Davos just a couple weeks ago, once again laying out publicly his stakeholder capitalist agenda for everyone to see. And the way the World Economic Forum sees stakeholder capitalism is through a range of, quote, multi-stakeholder partnerships bringing together the private sector, aka for-profit businesses, governments, and civil society across the international community for the betterment of the planet and the people who live on the planet. Now, once again, that sounds warm and fuzzy, doesn't it? The idea of multi-stakeholder capitalism, the public and the private sector coming together to, quote, improve the state of the world, which just so happens to be the motto of the World Economic Forum. But something to think about here is, are these stakeholders created equal?
Business leaders wanting to participate in WEF pay between $60,000 and $600,000, while everyone else, including heads of state, media, celebrities, and civil society leaders, get free entry.
So let's not beat around the bush here. We have an annual meeting bringing together prominent stakeholders from both the public and private sectors, but only one group is funding the entire event. Wouldn't that not create an obtuse incentive structure akin to lobbying, right? One group of stakeholders is entirely profit-driven, beholden to no country or community in particular, paying for access to another group of stakeholders who happen to be responsible for drafting and passing legislation within their respective countries. Ian Weck writes in Open Democracy, an online independent journal, quote, instead of corporations serving many stakeholders, in the multi-stakeholder model of global governance, corporations are promoted to being official stakeholders in global decision-making, while governments are relegated to being one of many stakeholders. In practice, corporations become the main stakeholders, while governments take a backseat role and civil society is mainly window dressing. A little frightening, but not a conspiracy. It's an idea openly discussed by the participants of the World Economic Forum. Wet continues, the plan from which the Great Reset originated was called the Global Redesign Initiative. Drafted by the World Economic Forum after the 2008 economic crisis, the initiative contains a 600-page report on transforming global governance. In the World Economic Forum's vision, quote, the government voice would be one among many without always being the final arbiter. Now that's the reset, a reframing of global capitalism to convince us that corporations and other privately funded special interest groups and foundations have the answers for all of the world's problems and thus should play a huge role in dictating the direction of global society, and that we should trust them to fix everything that's wrong with the world, whether it be inequality, geopolitical turmoil, the pandemic, or climate change. A noble sounding effort, never mind the obvious that the World Economic Forum's vision of multi-stakeholder governance, by definition, must give corporations more power by putting unelected stakeholders in positions of power to make decisions that greatly impact global society, while diminishing the role of democratically elected governments. Even putting that aside, there is little to no evidence that public-private partnerships have any positive effect on society. In fact, the contrary. Citing an Oxfam report from 2019, recent academic studies and reviews have found mixed evidence on learning outcomes in education PPPs, that's public-private partnerships, and no evidence that they consistently perform better than public schools. Studies have also raised strong and consistent concerns about the impact of education PPPs on inequality and socioeconomic segregation. One study of 17 countries found that in the majority of countries, PPP schools are reinforcing social disparities by disproportionately serving students in upper income quintiles. Not all that surprising given the fundamental reason why a for-profit institution exists in the first place. Quote, PPPs are used to conceal public borrowing while providing long-term state guarantees for profits to private companies. Private sector corporations must maximize profits if they are to survive. This is fundamentally incompatible with protecting the environment and ensuring universal access to quality public services. And this is the scary part. Year after year, billionaires like Bill Gates will use the World Economic Forum as a platform to preach altruism without any kind of pushback and pretend to fight inequality through multi-stakeholder capitalism and public-private partnerships while continuing to enrich themselves.
Well, the primary focus of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is to improve health equity. That's what Melinda and I picked back in the year 2000, where we first got going. And partnerships with companies like Pfizer have been key to the progress we've made. For example, Gavi got started, actually announced here at Davos.
Yes, let's talk about Gavi for a second. The Public-Private Global Vaccine Alliance co-leading COVAX, which is supposed to be this kind of groundbreaking global collaboration to accelerate the development, production, and equitable access to COVID-19 tests, treatments, and vaccines. And just to be fair to them, the COVID-19 vaccine distribution was obviously a very challenging environment with the entire world needing vaccines at the same time. But the truth is, as put by Sophie Harman, professor of international politics at the Queen Mary University of London, quote, if your problem is you want to have affordable vaccines around the world to cover the majority of the world, then the solution would be free licensing or compulsory licensing. COVAX doesn't do that, she explained. It feels like it's the kind of excuse saying, yes, we're doing equitable vaccines. We got COVAX. Look at it rolling out in Ghana. Isn't this a great success? Right? Unfortunately, not complicated nor opaque. The former, an intellectual property waiver, would once again necessarily impact the bottom line profits of the major vaccine manufacturers like Pfizer and Moderna, while the latter gives the illusion that COVAX is part of the solution when it's actually part of the problem. Once again, not claiming that COVAX did nothing. It certainly did something, but not much. According to Doctors Without Borders, today, only 10% of people in low-income countries have received at least one COVID-19 vaccine dose, compared to 77% in high-income countries. And they can't do much because Public-private partnerships like kovacs must operate within the confines of a predefined set of parameters that cannot be breached, meaning that the partnership cannot encroach or infringe on the interests of the sponsoring corporation or private interests. The same goes for ESG, which stands for environment, social, and governance, another pillar of stakeholder capitalism promulgated by the World Economic Forum as the private sector solution to addressing climate change. Except that it's a huge scam. Citing a CNBC article, BlackRock's former sustainable investing chief now thinks ESG is a dangerous placebo. Tariq Fancy, BlackRock's first global chief investment officer for sustainable investing, argued that financial institutions have an obvious motivation to push for ESG products given these have higher fees, which then improves their profits. But there are other issues with ESG investing, according to Fancy, including the subjectivity and the unreliability of data and ratings that are constantly changing. For example, Elon Musk's electric vehicle company, Tesla, being booted from the S&P 500 ESG index, while defense contractors like Lockheed Martin use their ESG placement to launder the branding of profiting off war. And my point here is, no matter how socially sensitive a large multinational business like BlackRock may publicly project themselves to be, they can't actually deviate much from what they were built to do, which is wealth accumulation above all else. And thus, there cannot be any other outcome other than exploitation and oppression. Perhaps most frightening of all, the forum's leaders have made it a top priority to ensure that Davos maintains its status as the perennial get-together of the 1%, to cosplay as fixers of inequality and to pontificate about the problems of the world, which, by the way, they have a big part in causing and also benefiting from, without any scrutiny from the mainstream media whatsoever.
When I mention now names like Merkel, even Vladimir Putin and so on, they all have been young global leaders of the World Economic Forum. Mm-hmm. But what we are very proud of now, the young generation, like Prime Minister Trudeau, President of Argentina and so on, that we penetrate the cabinets.
Penetrating governments to adopt your agenda. Doesn't sound all too altruistic or democratic, but it's all about the art of the sale, right? Of getting people to adopt a tyrannical ideology masquerading around as multi-stakeholder capitalism. And if we think about this a little deeper, the word salad that is Davos year after year, a regurgitation of amorphic words and nebulous ideas that mean nothing at all, like this year's theme of working together to regain trust, is nothing more than a gradual, sustained, and most importantly, an effective encroachment that has shifted policymaking from democratically elected leaders and governments into the hands of an unelected global cadre of corporate executives and billionaires, and that future is truly terrifying. That's all from me this time. I hope you enjoyed today's discussion about Klaus Schwab and the sinister motives behind Davos and the World Economic Forum. If you'd like to know more about this topic and many others, please check out my channel 5149 with James Lee, where I release weekly videos relating to the intersection of business and politics and society. The link will be in the description below. And of course, subscribe to Breaking Points. And thank you so much for your time today.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.